Welcome to our Curious Amalgam, the weekly podcast brought to you by the Antitrust Law Section of the American Bar Association. Our Curious Amalgam explores the fascinating and increasingly overlapping world of competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law. Each week, we bring you leading global experts on the most compelling issues of the day. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to Our Curious Amalgam, the podcast from the American Bar Association Antitrust Law Section. My name is Christina Ma, and today's topic is, what does it take to reach the top? A conversation with the 2020 Hall of Fame-inism award winners. For the last 3 years, the Women.Connected Committee of the ABA Antitrust Law Section has raised awareness of the ongoing challenges women face in the legal workforce and provided support for attorneys young and old as they navigate these challenges in the course of their careers. Today, we are honored to welcome to a very special edition of Our Curious Amalgam, the 4 inaugural inductees to the committee's Hall of Fame-inism to celebrate their accomplishments and to discuss what more can be done to advance women within the antitrust bar. Joining me today to introduce our esteemed guests is my co-host, Alicia Downey. Alicia, would you do the honors of introducing our guests?
It would be a privilege to do so. Thanks, Christina. In reverse alphabetical order, Bonny Sweeney is a partner at Hausfeld, LLP, a global litigation firm. From her office in San Francisco, she co-chairs the firm's antitrust practice group and serves on the management committee. In addition to representing plaintiffs in many, many noteworthy class action suits, she is a prominent sports law practitioner. Bonny holds multiple leadership positions in the section of antitrust law, including as a member of the Special Ops Team Imagining Antitrust Law Section 2.0 and as a member of the section's Presidential Transition Task Force. Lisa Phelan is a partner in the Washington, D.C. office of Morrison & Foerster and a member of the firm's global antitrust law practice and investigations and white-collar groups. She is a former chief of the National Criminal Enforcement and Washington Criminal One sections of the U.S. Department of Justice Antitrust Division. Lisa served more than 25 years at the DOJ, and she, too, has held various leadership positions in the antitrust law section. A few years ago, she founded Women in Cartels, an international group of antitrust practitioners involved in cartel defense work. Debbie Majoras is Chief Legal Officer and Secretary of Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, Ohio. Before joining Procter & Gamble in 2008, she served a 4-year term as Chairman of the Federal Trade Commission. Before that, she served a 2-year stint as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Antitrust Division, and before that, spent 10 years in private practice at Jones Day. She is an advisor to the International Competition Network and co-chairs the International Competition Policy Working Group of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Margaret Guerin-Calvert is not an antitrust lawyer. She's a Washington, D.C.-based economist with over 30 years of experience in litigation consulting on antitrust matters in a variety of industries. She was a founding director of the economic consulting firm Compass Lexicon eventually, and is currently a senior managing director at FTI Consulting and president of the Center for Healthcare Economics and Policy. She has been deeply involved in the antitrust law section in various roles for many years and is a frequent speaker at section events. Now, Christina, why don't we start talking to these amazing women?
I was going to say it was quite a mouthful. We are very, very privileged and honored to have you guys. Thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with us. We wanted to pick your brain and hear from you about your experiences and hopefully for our listenership to learn from those experiences and to hear from you on how to make it. So we've all had mentors in our life, and there's increasing discussion about not just mentors, but also sponsorship. And would love to hear from you as to the role of mentorship and or sponsorship in your career. And if not those, what's been the sort of most important external source that has propelled your career and your success? I guess, Debbie, we'll start with you.
Well, thanks very much, Christina and Alicia. It's really an honor to be here and to be with old friends. So thank you. Look, there's no question that mentorship has been a huge part of my career at both ends. sponsorship has come along a little bit later. When I was at the law firm, I started working for Joe Sims, who, most people remember as a longtime antitrust partner. And there's just no question when I look back, he was, one of the best mentors I've ever had. And now that I know what a sponsor is, he was that as well. He was a very powerful figure in the firm and in the antitrust bar. And we gained trust very early on in working together. And I think that one of the most interesting things about mentoring, it comes from different places. In that case, I didn't even really know I was being mentored, right? It was happening and I was learning and Joe was gaining, trust in my abilities and the like, which would help me through various stages of my career without a doubt. But it's just funny, I didn't really think about it that way. Sometimes people get mentors assigned to them and sometimes that works or doesn't work, right? It can. But in my case, it was just very natural through work. I would say, though, too, thinking about other external, I think sometimes we forget the impact that our peers have on us as well as we're working with them. And even people who, as we're leaders, work, for us. I remember when I was at the FTC and I was assembling the senior staff. And if you looked at them sort of age and experience wise, they were all mostly older than me. And someone came up to me and whispered in my ear, you might want to think about that because you don't want people to think that you're not definitely in charge and that you need, this kind of help. And I'm glad I said at the time, I don't look at it that way. I love surrounding myself with really good and smart people. And that's what makes me better and helps me learn. So I think mentors we think of as people who have gone before us, and often they have, and they can be very, very effective. But all those people around us can, certainly in my career, have just made an enormous impact and have been a huge help, still are, in my learning and development.
Great. Meg, I know you have probably unique experiences as an economist. Sort of what's the role of mentorship in that path?
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, to me, as I, think about it, it's, are there pivotal people who unintentionally mentor you? To me, when I look back and think about, a critical point, a critical influence, when I was a senior in college, one of my professors, Jerry Stein, who I'd taken money in banking from, a field I was not going to go into, called me in and said, I'm willing to write you a letter of recommendation for graduate school. I encourage you to go into the field, but this is a field that does not have a lot of women. And it's going to be really challenging. And he handed me a piece of paper. This was in the 70s, no emails yet, hadn't been invented. He handed me a piece of paper and he said, here are 3 tenured women professors on the East Coast. You should call them or go visit them. And the mentorship was, recognizing this was not going to be easy to do. It was something where there were not a lot of women in it. But even him just offering this kind of said, I deserve to be part of it. And even though I was just a senior in college. So that, I think was great. A second aspect, I had the privilege of having Bobby Willig and Uwe Reinhardt as my professors and advisors in graduate school. And, they really mentored in terms of you got to get it right, which I think was critical. But I learned a lot in particular from Bobby's mentorship of me when I was an assistant chief at the Department of Justice and in many other roles. And, my takeaway was not only Bobby kind of mentoring me in terms of creating opportunities, being willing to do joint testimony with me, was, again, a great confidence builder that I could be, on a declaration or an affidavit or appearing before an agency. But what I saw him do for our younger staff members taught me a lot about how to mentor, which is where he would challenge people to give answers that he knew already, but to really encourage people to think and to be independent. So I think that is something where I benefited from it, but I particularly learned also as to how you can mentor others. And then lastly, I think where the sections played a significant role at critical parts of my career, there really wasn't anyone in my organization to whom I could turn to. And so having mentors from outside of your organization who could give you career advice. For example, when we were thinking about setting up Compass, I had the advantage of talking with Jan McDavid and Jim Rill as to, does this make sense? What is the need in the area? So those, again, were great mentors and friends and colleagues who could give guidance, not just for me, but for a broader group of people.
Thank you, Meg. You raise a really interesting point. And I'm sure actually when you guys were growing up in your careers, there weren't necessarily a lot of women leaders for you to look up to, a lot of women mentors. Now it's changing a little, at least. Bonnie or Lisa, do you have a view on sort of, do you need women mentors? Did you have female mentors? And how did they play a different role, if at all, compared to male mentors?
Yeah, I'll go first. That's a great question. I didn't have a lot of female mentors. I had what I think of as role models. My first job was at Foley, Hoag and Elliott. At that time, Judge Lynch was the head of the litigation department. She was just so smart and such a brilliant writer. And so I learned a lot from her, but I wouldn't describe her as a mentor necessarily. And I don't think there were mentor-mentee relationships then that were encouraged or certainly thought about in those ways. I have had really good mentors later in my career, male mentors. My old firm, Dennis Stewart and Len Simon, were really great at encouraging me to take leadership roles in cases, which I think is really critical. But there weren't a lot of women ahead of me in a lot of my practice. So I turned to those role models like Judge Lynch. I had a law professor in college who's now a judge on the Sixth Circuit, Karen Nelson Moore, and she was fabulous in every way. She was really brilliant and confident, but she had the kind of personality that I wanted to emulate, and that she was always very compassionate and courteous and kind. And so there were definitely some women role models and mentors out there, but I think there's a lot more women now, obviously, in the field. And so I think it's a different day for sure.
Yeah, and I would just add, Christina, I certainly have had a broad mix of both female and male mentors, and because it's antitrust generally and cartel space particularly tends to be fairly male dominated, I would say probably more on balance male mentors over time who were absolutely wonderful. But I was incredibly lucky as a brand new honors program attorney at the Department of Justice to be assigned to a grand jury investigation with a female lead attorney. And her name was Carolyn Mark, and she's retired now, but she was very intentional in her mentoring of me in a way that I didn't fully appreciate at the time. But now looking back, realized what an amazing start and boost to my confidence it gave me. She would, for everything, she included me in every single conversation she was having with the defense counsel, with the judge at a hearing, with the grand jury. I was everywhere. And we would have conversations before and after about what do we want to accomplish here in this conversation or in this situation. And then afterwards, how did it go? How could we have done it better? And after several rounds of that, or whatever the type of interaction was, luckily she didn't warn me that she was going to do this, but she would say to me, okay, now you're going to handle this. After we had the preliminary conversation. And I was, of course, petrified. I was 25 years old. I had no idea what I was doing, but she had confidence in me that I could handle it. And did I do a perfect job every time? Of course I did not. But then we would debrief it and what could I have done better? But it just gave me such a confidence boost that she believed I could do it. And then gradually I gained confidence in myself. So mentors can be amazingly influential. And if anyone knows me, they'll say I don't suffer for confidence these days, nor have I most of my career. And I credit a lot of it to Carolyn.
If I could maybe follow up Lisa's comment, I think I also started, I think a couple years older at the age of 27 in what was then the Economic Policy Office at the Department of Justice, and had the opportunity to testify when I was 28 years old. And it was, again, the same kind of thing. I got mentored by the legal team that I was working with, by economists in the Economic Policy Office who were willing to read my drafts, and by some who did mock depositions of me. And so it's to really have that ability to test you, but then have you do it on your own. And the confidence that people say you can do it on your own is really a great opportunity.
Well, thanks, Meg. And I think it's, every career, as we know, has ups and downs. And so what we'd like to know is whether you can remember a time when you just wanted to give up. And how did you get through it? So Lisa, since we ended with you, can we start with you in response to this question?
Sure. And I can remember very vividly a situation when I, contemplated, should I give up? I had, it was, well into my career, and there was an opportunity for a promotion that, again, back to that confidence. I was confident I was the best qualified candidate that was applying for the promotion, and I really wanted it, and I really thought I had done everything to earn it, and I didn't get it. And, part of it was like, well, what am I doing? I've done everything I could possibly do. I've been, busting my bottom, and I still didn't get it. Oh, woe was me. And so I gave myself 24 hours to go home and have a glass of wine and a bubble bath and sulk. But then the next day I said to myself, stop being so self-absorbed. You already have a position. At that point, I was in management at the DOJ. You have a position of leadership. You have knowledge and experience to share with other people. What are you doing waiting for some particular title or position to enable you to do what you really want to do, which is to be more involved with more teams and more cases, and really help advance the careers of others in a way that your career was helped and advanced. So that's around the time that I started my Women Cartels group. And it's also when I started doing what I called fireside chats with some of the younger attorneys and the newer attorneys inside the DOJ to sort of share my experience and knowledge that I'd picked up over so many years. And I have to tell you that how much I gained and how much I got back from those experiences so outweighed whatever a title would have given me. If folks are inclined to give up, just kind of step back and take a look at the bigger picture would be my advice, because right where you sit, there's always so much you can do.
Oh, that's great. So Meg, how about you? Did you ever want to just take that job and shove it?
Yeah, and I think maybe a related point to what Lisa just talked about, there was a point where I felt, completely overwhelmed, I would say. It was also when I was at the Antitrust Division, and where just the sheer number of issues that were there across the many industries that I was responsible for, the case decisions, just the day-to-day of all of the work. My daughter was relatively young at that point, and really feeling my day was, 18, 19 hours, and feeling like it's just too much. And I took, a very hard look, and I realized that I had this philosophy of the buck stops here. And as a result, my desk was overwhelmed. And I learned that I actually had to do a much, much better job. I had a phenomenal team, a phenomenal group of people. And rather than giving up, I started to learn, still not by any means perfect at it, to delegate, to just trust that there were competent people that I could delegate some decisions, that I could say no to a meeting, that I could say, let's do it tomorrow rather than today, and that I could just actually assert a little bit more control over things. So those were really invigorating areas where I started to re-love my job, which I had come not to like, and to choose to focus on what difference am I making. And then also to learn to be just able to take the time for myself and my daughter and my family. The other part.
Good lessons. Turning to you, Bonny, when it wasn't just rainbows and unicorns, what did you do?
Well, I don't remember ever thinking I would quit, I would give up. But there were lots of moments in my career when I have felt like I would never be part of this exclusive club of male lawyers, especially in my practice area. There just weren't that many women, and there were a lot of men in leadership positions. And I remember one event, I was at a multi-day mediation with several of my male colleagues, and we agreed, I thought, to have dinner. So I went to this steakhouse. Of course, it was a steakhouse. And I waited, and they didn't show. And then the next day during the mediation, I learned that they had all gone to a strip club that night. And so spent the entire day, and you know what mediations are like. You're trapped in a room with people. Spent the entire day joking and laughing about their night before. It was very it was a demoralizing, excruciating day. And I remember I went for a long run that afternoon, and I was pounding up this hill, and this young woman I didn't know, a stranger, just shouted at me, "You go, girl." And that sort of is emblematic for me of I have always depended upon my women friends, both in the law and outside the law, to sort of be able to talk to them just about these kinds of experiences.
That's a truly horrible story. Thank you for telling us that.
Something that hopefully will not happen in this family.
Debbie, how about you? Was there a time you just wanted to give up? And if so, what'd you do?
More than one, I'm sure. It kind of comes in different ways. First, as Lisa said, and it must be something about the Antitrust Division, because I had a very similar experience, and Lisa would remember it because she was there. And I didn't get the job to lead the division when I wanted it. And, very much like Lisa, or just very much like any time when you think you're going to give up, it's the first thing you have to do is step back, like literally just remove yourself from the situation and try to find a way, whether it's being with your family so they can tell you how wonderful you are, whether it's the glass of wine in the bath or what have you. You just have to get away from it and start thinking it through. If you can use your brain to think through things logically, your emotions and your ego can eventually catch up. And what I learned through that experience was that people always have disappointments in their career. Everyone does. The key is, did you meet it with grace and move forward? That's what people really are looking at. And so I learned a lot from that experience. Other times, truthfully, how I got through those days was I declared myself to be a recovering perfectionist control freak, because what I realized is that some of the pressure I was feeling that made me feel like I wasn't always measuring up or that I couldn't go on, I was putting on myself. And perfectionism is a disease and a myth, and it's actually stupid and arrogant if you really think about it. But so many of us have had it, and so that's why I say I'm recovering, because I'm never all the way out of it. And the control thing is also something you have to let go. And then the final thing I'll say is, literally in my job at P&G, which I've been doing for quite some time now, and it's very intense. And last year, I was not sure that I had the energy to give the company what they needed. And so our head of HR, who's a friend of mine, said, "We don't want you to go. Would you consider taking a sabbatical?" And I want to tell you, it was like I was standing at the edge of a desert and someone had handed me a cold glass of water. I was like, could I do that? And I knew that P&G had a sabbatical program, but, at my level and, oh my God. I took 2 months. It wasn't long. I took 2 months. One of the best decisions I've ever made in my career, and every company and every firm should have this option. Because think about it this way. What do you want? Do you want your people to be so tired that they need to go away, take some time off, and then go sell their services to somebody else? Or do you want to give them a few months off, let them regroup, get back to taking care of ourselves, and all of that, and then come back with renewed energy, which I did come back with a lot of renewed energy. So just a couple of examples there.
That's great. I mean, I'm violently nodding along with all of your stories. And I think the evidence that women have come a long way, not just women, but society has come a long way to acknowledge these challenges. But I guess, Bonny, starting with you, what do you believe to be the biggest challenge going forward to the advancement of women in the legal force? And you guys all talked about specifically antitrust. And so if there's anything specific to antitrust, would also be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, well, I'm no expert, and I highly recommend this recent ABA study Bobby Liebenberg and Stephanie Scharf put out called Walking Out the Door, about why experienced women in law are leaving the law. But, from my point of view, it seems like one big remaining challenge is just simply the power of habit and the power of relationships. I mean, I see all these instances where people in senior levels within law firms unknowingly sort of favor men. Perhaps they go out to lunch, or they or between law firms, especially in the practice area that I'm involved in, relationships are important in terms of plaintiffs' counsel often join together in large MDLs. And so picking up the phone and calling someone that you know, as opposed to someone who might be a little newer to the practice, but who is in charge of a particular case. So I think it requires a lot of mindfulness on the part of everyone to just sort of break those habits, and sometimes not just act on the basis of a long-standing relationship, but see who really is in charge, or who should be having this opportunity, as opposed to just the person that you normally take along to lunch or to some outing or other.
That's great. Debbie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I do think that life balance is still a huge challenge, and I think family caretaking still falls, far more on women and families than it should. We see this coming out of COVID. The statistics are just striking with the pressures and the stress and the number of women who are considering leaving, not only in our profession, but just leaving the workforce because it's just too much. And so my view is that our profession is abysmal at life balance, that law firms in particular, not all, but many are still very bad at it. There's still this culture of this sort of macho culture of working harder as opposed to working smarter, and part of it is the billable hour and so forth. But my view is that COVID is a great opportunity. It's a terrible thing, but it's a great opportunity now to rethink the workplace and rethink how we balance lives, because I think we still don't have this right, and it still disproportionately harms women more. And some of it too is the pressure that we put on ourselves that I talked about before. That we say, look, I'm not measuring up here, and I'm not measuring up here, and I just can't live that way. And the fact that we're still talking about this after all these years, we've got to do better. And the last thing I'll say about that is that, look, we've been in the workplace now for quite some time. We're part of it. We're not taking it as it came, as we used to, right? It was established really for men who had families at home, and that was the way it was. We've been in this now. We have some power, and we have some authority, and we can make it better, but we've got to be intentional about it.
Yeah, I think your example even about the sabbatical is indicative, right? Wanting to opt out and just being handed an opportunity to take some time. It's powerful.
Well, the number of notes that I got from all over Procter & Gamble, even from people I didn't know, who said, thank you for doing that. It's you're giving the rest of us permission to take care of ourselves.
Certainly a message of the day, if there is any. Lisa, any further thoughts?
Well, I couldn't agree with more with everything I just heard from Deb and from Bonny. But, I think seeing role models ahead of you is really, really important. I'm actually proud and happy that Morrison and Foerster just hit the makes it one of the top 3 firms in the country for percent of female equity partners, but that's 26%, which is hooray, more than it was, but still, right? Why only 26% when more than half of the women coming out of law school, more than half the lawyers have been women for how many decades now? So that's part of it, that you need to see people in front of you that have done it, and including people like myself who had 4 children and still got there, right? But also, it always bothers me that efforts and meetings and groups to work on the issue of equity for women are usually all or almost all women. And I think we really need to see men being allies in a more concrete and significant way to bring about the change. It's not a woman's problem if women aren't being fairly represented. It's an implicit bias structure, as Debbie was just talking about, and everybody together has to make that change, not women alone.
And Meg, I know you had also mentioned previously kind of coming up when your children were quite young. It's unfortunate that we're having to make all these sort of most time that we're in front is when, childbearing years. And any reactions, thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts, and I have one daughter who's now almost 35 and doing just fabulously well, and is a mentor to me in a way. But I would add just a couple things following on the comments. One is, I think that there needs to be, there's a fewness of women in the senior ranks is obviously a huge issue across economics, across law. One of the things is I think there needs to be much greater weight in whether it's promotions or recognition or others about what it is, the qualities of making a team work, making a business work, making a service line work. There is a lot that I find in particular that women professionals contribute in addition to professional excellence that maybe doesn't get as much credit as it should. And I think if that glue, what I've learned out of COVID is the incredible community and shared values that it has created to address it. And I think, placing greater value on that. But the other challenge I particularly see, as I'm, 35 years into this, I don't see a very large number of women. I think the women who face the greatest challenges are in their 40s and early 50s. And I think trying to find a way to really foster that group to stay and to have that life balance and to get that recognition, that will help us overcome things.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. And to close out this episode, what we'd like to do is take a walk around the room and ask each of you to tell us something interesting about yourself that we might not know if we only knew you professionally. So I'm going to start with Debbie.
So I guess what I would say is that I always in my life had wanted to do something in sports, but I was never a great athlete or anything, and just a great sports fan. But anyway, last year, miraculously, something came my way, and it's become the most fun thing I've ever done in my career. No offense to Proctor, the FTC, the DOJ, or Jones Day. And that is, I went on the board of the United States Golf Association. And so I'm going to the Masters next week. And it's just super fun. I work with great people, and it's just wonderful to have such a fun thing as part of my portfolio.
Oh, that's great. Meg, how about you?
I'm going to do one that's a joke in a way, and the other similar to what we just heard. One is I get kidded a lot in my family that in high school I got the Betty Crocker Homemaker Award, which was a test that only girls were allowed to take. And so that kind of is a certificate that I have from a long time ago. But I think the most fun thing I did that was a real challenge to me, not golf, but I did a track day in my husband's Porsche. and driving 120 miles an hour and circulating around a track for several laps at very high rates of speed was a challenge I never thought I could take on, and hope to do it again.
Wow. Okay, Bonnie, your turn. What?
Well, I can't top Meg's prize from her baking award, but I also got a baking award when I was in high school. I won the cherry pie baking contest, and to this day, my friends and family always say that I make the best pie. So my favorites are blackberry and pecan.
Well, you were invited over for Thanksgiving.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Lisa.
Well, as long as we're going to focus on high school, I'll see if I can top Meg and her award. I worked at Friendly's Ice Cream when I was in high school, and I won Friendly Waitress of the Year for the Western District of Pennsylvania. $50 and a plaque that I still have, and I bring it out and impress my kids whenever I get a chance.
Well, those are all very interesting things.
Amazing accomplishments from a very young age, all. All, thank you again for being our guest today. Again, we feel very honored and privileged to have you. And to everyone listening to this episode of Our Curious Amalgam, see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Our Curious Amalgam, a competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law podcast. It is produced and shared around the globe by ABA's Antitrust Law Section. The opinions expressed by the participants in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent their employer or other organizations. If you like what you heard or would like to become a member of the American Bar Association, please check out what the Antitrust section has to offer at ambar.org/antitrust. You can learn more about our podcast at ourcuriousamalgam.com. If you have comments, suggestions, or podcast ideas, please reach out to us at podcast@ourcuriousamalgam.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.